This is Democracy Watch. All right, Marc, this is a case that's going to be decided at the Supreme Court any moment now that will have major implications for the January 6th insurrectionists. And I think with the presidential case, the presidential immunity case pending, this one has really flown under the radar. But obviously, this is huge here. Can you talk about the Fisher case?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. The Fisher case is arguably as big and as important as any of the other cases that are pending before the U.S. Supreme Court, including the immunity case. And here's why. Many of the January 6th insurrectionists were charged and pled guilty or were convicted under a statute that was amended and toughened as a result of the financial crisis as part of what's called the Sarbanes-Oxley law. And this toughening of the law said that if you are involved in obstructing an official proceeding of the government, you are subject to enhanced criminal penalties, right? It's not just that it's a felony, but that the potential sentences are much longer. And so this has been the cornerstone of the cases that have been brought against the bulk of the violent insurrectionists. You know, it's the cases against the handful of leaders for very, very serious things have been different. You know, you've had a couple charged with treason, and then you've had some low-level people who have just been charged with, like disorderly conduct. But a lot of the people who, when we talk about the January 6th insurrectionists, they have been charged under this statute, and conservatives on the Supreme Court may dismantle this law as it applies to the insurrectionists while leaving it in place for other purposes.
Okay, so if the Supreme Court rules in the insurrectionists' favor here, what happens to these January 6 rioters who are right now either convicted or incarcerated as the result of this statute?
Yeah, so a number of them could see those convictions overturned. They could see them be subject to resentencing under lower penalties. It could have really, really big consequences. Donald Trump, for example, has been indicted for violating this particular statute. Now, he's been indicted for other statutes as well, so it wouldn't dismiss the indictment the way the immunity case would if he got absolute immunity. But have no doubt that Donald Trump would claim that he was vindicated.
Right.
Donald Trump and the Republicans would claim that the January 6th insurrectionists are, what's the term they use? Hostages, right? They would say this is just evidence. So there's a lot of big stakes here. And I want to say again, this is not alarmism. The conservatives on the Supreme Court gave us, some pretty strong indications that they are looking for a way not to apply this statute.
Do you think it was a mistake for prosecutors to prosecute the insurrectionists under this specific statute? I'm assuming if you engage in an insurrection against the U.S. government, that there are a whole raft of statutes that prosecutors could have chosen from in terms of prosecuting these folks. So do you think it was a mistake to choose this one, or would conservatives have just taken any statute that they used and tried to turn it on its head in an effort to absolve them after the fact?
I have to say, I have been critical of a lot of oral arguments in the U.S. Supreme Court. I've been critical of a lot of court decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court. There is no argument that I ended listening to where I was left more dispirited or concerned about the interplay of ideology and politics with textualism and other conservative theories than this one. I mean, the statute at issue, and I've tried to keep this at a high level of generality, not to get people too dragged into the weeds, but the statute at issue makes it a felony to corruptly obstruct, influence, or impede any official proceeding. Okay? By its plain terms, the congressional meeting, the joint session of Congress, when they count these ballots, is an official proceeding. And by its plain terms, if you are, assaulting police officers, if you are breaking down barricades, if you are smashing in windows, if you are taking over the House and Senate floor, you are obstructing and impeding that official proceeding. So honestly, Brian, I don't think we should be faulting the Department of Justice for relying on a statute that says what it says.
Right, right. And by the way, I had mentioned that this decision will be released any moment now from the Supreme Court. When it is, the first place you can read about it is on Democracy Docket. That's the free news outlet Marc founded to focus on everything voting in elections. So if you want to sign up, if you're not yet signed up, please make sure to do so. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Marc, if the Supreme Court rules that in the insurrectionist's favor in this case, and again, we'll get the results, within hours, days now, what are going to be the implications in the event of another January 6th style violent attack?
Yeah, so let's start with the fact that if they rule in the insurrectionist's favor, they are giving a permission structure. Now, I want everyone to be clear. I'm not saying they are blessing. I'm not saying they say it is good or it's okay. But they are giving a permission structure to MAGA Republicans, to Donald Trump, to claim that they have been vindicated. Okay? They won't be vindicated, but they are creating that permission structure to treat it as a vindication. And when you put it on top of that, the fact that, two of the spouses of presumably the Supreme Court justices who would rule in that direction have shown sympathies in one form or another with January 6th defendants or the events of January 6th, they are creating an even stronger permission structure. So I worry very much that before you get to what would it mean for charging decisions if there was another January 6th, think about what the implications are for causing another January 6th or creating the impression in people who have been lied to by the big lie, people who have been lied to by Donald Trump, people who have been embraced election denialism. What message are they going to take away? Well, they're going to take away the message that the Department of Justice was part of a deep state going after these people for no good reason, and the Supreme Court threw it out. And I think that creates a very, very dangerous position, a very, very dangerous situation as we head towards the final months of an election where Donald Trump is already inciting acts of violence. He is already, through his rhetoric, in prepping his supporters to not accept the outcome of an election. So I worry less, Brian, that that the Department of Justice wouldn't be able to find charges against another violent attack. And I worry a lot that this will create, like I said, a permission structure for people to feel like the violence was justified.
Well, all of this kind of strikes me as especially dangerous because, as you mentioned, the text of this statute is quite clear. So what are the implications of other statutes then if the plain text here can be so easily manipulated by these judges or justices to kind of comport with their political ideologies? Like, doesn't that put the whole system of law into jeopardy if you can have a very clear statute like the one that we're dealing with right now and the judges just say, like, nope, that's not what it means anymore because it doesn't comport with how I feel?
Look, I think that we are entering into a new level of danger that we have not seen. It is one thing for the Supreme Court to take a cramped view of the text of the Constitution and what it means, okay? Second Amendment jurisprudence, I would say, falls into that category. It is even worse for the Supreme Court to disregard settled precedent because there is a change in composition of the court and take away fundamental rights like we saw in Dobbs. I would argue we are now going one step further, which is that the Supreme Court in this case and in the immunity case would have to affirmatively disregard the text. I mean, you cannot make an argument that obstruct, influence, or impede an official proceeding does not apply on its plain text to January 6th. You cannot argue that the U.S. Constitution confers immunity, absolute immunity on a president when there is no textual support for it and there's no originalist support. We are going into a new uncharted territory where it is just conservative vibism is the doctrine of the Supreme Court. It is like whatever vibe the conservatives on the Supreme Court feel like ought to be the law. And that, Brian, will be a very, very dangerous place for the Supreme Court to be, given the challenges to its legitimacy. And as you say, it makes it impossible to predict what other statutes, what other constitutional provisions the court will decide doesn't sort of meet their vibe for where they think the law ought to go.
Which, by the way, underscores as we head toward this election, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito are 75 and 74 years old. If Donald Trump gets reelected, he will replace both of those people with 40-year-olds in their mold to carry out their work for the rest of our lives, basically. So even if you're not down with Biden for whatever reason in this election, think about the Supreme Court. That's what's at stake. That's what this election's about as we head toward November. It's going to be the Supreme Court and the implications of this court on cases, involving democracy, gun rights, abortion rights, contraception, IVF, same-sex marriage, fair maps, Voting Rights Act, which we talk about ad nauseum here, and just on and on. So that's really what we're looking at as we head toward November. With that said, another note just for folks watching right now. All of this really does highlight the importance that the courts play. And of course, the work that Marc and his team are doing in the courts can't be overstated. So if you want to support their work, please make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket. Again, I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.